Scars, a Ghosts Movement essay. A scar is not the injury. It is what arrives after the danger has passed, after the body has decided that life will continue. It is the mark left by care, time, and repetition. We often confuse scars with what caused them, but they are not the same thing. A wound is an opening. A scar is a closure. A wound is exposure. A scar is boundary. This distinction matters because much of how we speak about pain, survival, and identity collapses these two things into one. We praise the struggle, we retell the injury, we elevate the moment of damage as if that is where meaning lives. But the scar does not belong to the moment of harm. It belongs to everything that came after. It belongs to what stayed. To honour a scar is not to celebrate what caused it. It is to recognise the intelligence of repair. It is to acknowledge that something in the body, or the psyche, or the lineage chose not to remain open forever. The scar is evidence that closure is possible without erasure. If you look closely at a physical scar, you will see this truth written into the skin. Scar tissue is different. It is tougher, less elastic, sometimes raised or discoloured. It does not pretend to be what came before. It does not restore the original surface. It creates something new. The body does not attempt to rewind time. It adapts forward. This is one of the most honest things the body does. We often expect emotional life to do the opposite. We speak as if healing should return us to a previous version of ourselves, unmarked and unchanged. But the body never does this. It never hides the fact that something happened. It does not erase the record. It reorganizes around it. A scar says, this is where something broke, and this is where something held. Many people carry scars they rarely touch. Some are hidden beneath clothing. Some are visible but unacknowledged. Some live inside, where language struggles to reach them. Yet all scars, whether seen or unseen, share a common origin. They exist because something survived long enough to repair. There is a quiet dignity in that. Touching a scar is different from touching unbroken skin. The sensation is altered. Sometimes there is numbness, sometimes sensitivity, sometimes a strange mix of both. The nerves remember what happened there. They do not scream anymore, but they do not forget. The body does not forget. This matters because memory does not only live in thought, it lives in tissue. It lives in posture. It lives in the way a hand hesitates before resting on a certain place. A scar is memory that has settled. When you place your fingers on a scar, you are not revisiting the injury. You are meeting the result of survival. You are touching the place where time intervened. This is why some people instinctively protect their scars, while others return to them again and again. The scar becomes a landmark. It says, here is where something changed. Emotional scars work in much the same way, even if they do not show themselves on the surface. They are not constant pain. They are altered sensitivity. They shape how we respond, how we trust, how we brace, how we soften. They are not proof of weakness. They are evidence of adaptation. An emotional scar is not the memory of what happened. It is the way the system reorganized afterward. It is the quiet rule that formed, the pattern that settled, the reflex that now exists. This is where misunderstanding often enters. People try to reopen emotional scars, believing that healing means reliving the injury until it no longer hurts. But scars are not wounds. They are not meant to be reopened. They are meant to be respected. Yet respect does not mean reverence. Scar tissue can protect, but it can also restrict. Physical scars can limit movement, pulling tight where flexibility once lived. Emotional scars can do the same. They can narrow possibility. They can turn caution into avoidance. They can make intimacy feel risky even when danger is no longer present. This is not failure. It is consequence. Honouring a scar does not mean pretending it only helps. It means recognizing that protection always comes with a cost. Something is held together. but something else may lose range. This is not a flaw in healing. It is the price of survival. There is honesty in allowing this tension to exist. We often rush to soften this truth, to reassure ourselves that scars are purely wise, purely adaptive, purely beneficial. But real scars are more complicated than that. They are functional, not ideal. They do not optimize life. They make it possible. Honoring a scar does not mean centering pain. It means recognizing the shape life took in response to it. There is a difference between honor and glorification. Glorifying the wound keeps attention fixed on the moment of damage. It risks turning harm into identity. Honor, by contrast, acknowledges endurance without fixation. It says, this happened, and something grew around it. We see this distinction clearly when we listen to how people speak about their past. Some stories are told as if the injury is the most important thing that ever occurred. Others are carried with a quieter gravity. The difference is not the severity of what happened. It is the relationship to the scar. A person who honors their scar does not need to describe the injury in detail. They carry its consequence in how they live, how they pause, how they recognize limits, how they recognize others. Because one of the most profound aspects of scars is how they tune perception. Once you carry a scar, you notice them in others, not always consciously. Sometimes it is a subtle recognition, a shared hesitation, a familiar silence, a way someone avoids a certain subject or reacts too quickly to a certain tone. Scars recognize scars. This recognition is not about comparison. It is not about ranking suffering. It is about resonance. When you have lived with a scar long enough, you can sense when someone else is moving around an old repair. You see the care in their boundaries. You notice the places they protect. This is one of the quiet foundations of empathy. Not the dramatic act of imagining another's pain, but the quieter awareness of how people organize themselves around what they have survived. It changes how you look at behavior. Some reactions stop looking like flaws and start looking like scar tissue. Not ideal perhaps, but functional, protective, earned. This does not excuse harm. Scar tissue can still cause friction. It can still bruise those who come too close. But seeing the scar does change the question being asked. It shifts from what is wrong here to what had to be held together. There is compassion in that shift, without sentimentality. Scars also do not exist only within individual lives. They travel through families, through cultures, through land. Ancestral scars are not metaphors. They are patterns carried forward. They live in inherited fears, in unspoken rules, in the shape of silence passed from one generation to the next. Some families carry scars of displacement, others of violence, others of deaths that were never spoken about directly. These scars often show up as emotional habits rather than stories. A family that avoids conflict, a family that expects abandonment, a family that treats closeness as dangerous. These are not random traits. They are adaptive responses that once kept someone safe. The original wound may be forgotten, but the scar remains active. Honoring ancestral scars means recognizing that not everything we carry began with us. Some sensitivities are older than our own lives. Some cautions were learned long before we were born. This recognition can soften self-judgment. It can replace the question, what is wrong with me, with what was already here. This is not about blaming the past. It is about understanding continuity. Scar tissue does not ask who caused the injury. It simply exists to hold things together. There is also another category of scar that rarely gets named, anticipated scars. These are marks we do not yet carry, but already feel forming. They belong to futures we can sense approaching. A parent aware that their own parents will one day die. A caregiver watching a loved one slowly decline. Someone living with a condition that will change them over time. Anticipated scars are not imagined. They shape behavior now. They alter presence. They change how moments are held. They can make time feel heavier, more fragile, more deliberate. We rarely talk about these scars because they have not yet arrived, but the body often knows what is coming long before it happens. The nervous system prepares. Emotional scar tissue begins to form in advance, not as fear, but as bracing. Honouring anticipated scars means allowing space for that quiet preparation without demanding reassurance or denial. It means recognising that some forms of adaptation begin before impact. Scars, whether past, present, inherited or anticipated, all share one function. They allow life to continue without pretending nothing happened. This is why the idea of returning to who you were before is so misleading. Before the scar, the body did not know what it now knows. It had not yet been tested in that way. The scar marks an expansion of experience, even when that experience was unwanted. There is a strange honesty in scar tissue. It does not smooth things over. It does not restore innocence. It does not aim for beauty. It aims for integrity. It holds the edges together. In this sense, scars are a form of truth-telling. They are the body's way of saying, something interrupted me, and I adapted. This is why touching a scar can feel grounding. It brings attention out of abstraction and into contact. It is not a story. It is a texture, a temperature, a boundary. It reminds the mind that survival is not theoretical. When you touch your own scar, you are touching time. Not the moment of injury, but the duration of recovery. The weeks, months, years during which the body did its work quietly, without ceremony. This is something worth noticing, especially in a culture that values dramatic change over slow repair. Scars are slow achievements. They cannot be rushed. They cannot be optimized. They arrive on the body's schedule. The same is true emotionally. Emotional scars form through repeated exposure to safety after harm. They do not appear because of insight alone. They appear because the system experiences enough continuity to settle. This is why some scars take a lifetime to form, and why some never fully do. It is also why some people feel frustrated with their own scars. They expect to be more flexible, more open, more unaffected. They judge the stiffness where tenderness once was. But scar tissue was never meant to behave like uninjured tissue. It has a different job. Honouring a scar means adjusting expectations. It means recognizing that some limits are not failures. They are boundaries shaped by history. This recognition can also change how we relate to others. When we see someone hesitate, withdraw, or react strongly, we can choose to see scar tissue rather than character flaws. This does not remove responsibility, but it does add context. It allows for responses grounded in understanding rather than judgment. There is a quiet ethics in this way of seeing. It does not demand disclosure. It does not require people to explain their past. It simply assumes that everyone carries marks we cannot see, because no one moves through life unscarred. Even those who appear untouched carry subtle repairs, childhood illness, losses that were never spoken, moments of fear that reshape trust. Life leaves marks, whether we acknowledge them or not. The question is not whether we have scars, it is how we relate to them. Some people hide them, fearing that visibility equals weakness. Others display them as proof of endurance. Both responses make sense, but neither is required. A scar does not need to be shown to be honoured. It needs to be recognised internally as part of the landscape of the self. This internal recognition often brings a surprising softening, not because the scar disappears, but because it no longer has to justify its existence. When scars are denied, they harden. When they are acknowledged, they can settle into their role. This is true personally, relationally, and collectively. Collective scars show up in how societies organise themselves, in rules shaped by fear, in silences shaped by shame, in rituals shaped by remembrance. Honouring collective scars means recognising that many structures exist not because they are ideal, but because they once prevented collapse. This does not mean they should never change. It means they should be understood before they are dismantled. Scar tissue removed too quickly can reopen old wounds. There is wisdom in gradual change. At a personal level, this means allowing scars to inform without ruling, to be consulted, not obeyed. Scar tissue can guide decisions without dictating them. It can say, be careful here, without saying, never go here again. This balance is subtle and lived, not theoretical. It requires listening to the body, to emotion, to rhythm. It requires distinguishing between danger and memory. Scars help with this distinction. They remind us where sensitivity lives. They do not necessarily tell us what to do, but they tell us where attention is needed. In this way, scars become part of orientation, not something to overcome, but something to navigate with. Perhaps the most important shift is this: a scar is not a reminder of damage. It is a record of continuity. It marks the place where life refused to stop. When we honour scars, we shift focus from what broke us to what held us together, from the moment of harm to the long arc of adaptation, from identity shaped by injury to identity shaped by response. This does not erase pain. It places it within a wider field. Touching a scar, seeing it in another, recognizing it in a family line, or sensing it in the future, all invite the same quiet acknowledgement. Something happened. Something healed enough to leave a mark. Something remains. You can place your fingers there, not to reopen anything, not to explain anything, just to feel the edge that held and the life that continued around it.